UFC 288. We got Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo this weekend in New Jersey. This is a banger card, guys. I am really excited for it. And without further ado, let's get right into the action here. I'm going to be breaking down each fight, starting from the prelims all the way up to the main card. If you see a fight that you're more interested in, I'll throw them in the timestamps below for easy access. And let's get right into it, guys. First off on the card is Joseph Holmes versus Claudio Ribeiro. This is a middleweight bout. Joseph Holmes is 1-2 in the UFC. Claudio is 1-1 in the UFC. Claudio is the -170 favorite here, with Joseph Holmes being a +145 underdog. This was filmed after the weigh-ins. I like having just that added information you get from the weigh-in shows, so that's why I like posting and filming these on the Fridays before fights, because Joseph Holmes did miss weight this morning. What does that mean? It's kind of hard to say. I don't know if it really impacts my feelings too much. It could mean a few different things. It could mean maybe he wants to conserve some weight so he's got a little bit more energy into the fight. That's sort of a tactical way of looking at it, that perhaps he did it purposefully. I don't believe that he did that. He seemed pretty, honestly, disappointed in himself that he missed the weight. So I doubt that it was anything purposeful. More than likely, he just had an issue shedding those few pounds. He weighed in at 139, I believe, or 189 this morning. So is it a sign that he's not as locked in? Maybe, but if I was on the fence about this before, I'm definitely leaning Claudio Ribeiro now because of this news. He's a guy who's a really powerful striker. Every single one of his wins comes by KO, so Claudio KO is the pick here. Joseph Holmes lost to some lower unranked guys. Jamie Pickett, not the greatest losses in retrospect, so Claudio Ribeiro is the pick here. The next fight did get canceled that was originally scheduled, Zhumagulov versus Estevam. So we're going to skip right through that one. It's kind of unfortunate. Zhalgis, the Kazakhstani, that dude cannot catch a break. So wishing the best for him, that he can hopefully get a fight in soon. So he can get robbed by the judges again, evidently. Next up is Ikram Aliskerov versus Phil Hawes. Ikram is coming off of a Dana White Contender Series win, while Phil Hawes is coming off of a loss to Roman Dolidze, a brutal loss in which it looked like he tore his knee apart in a million different pieces, fought through it. So the dude's got grit, but then he just got KO'd, knee from hell from Roman Dolidze. So that fight was really tough to watch. Aliskerov is the favorite in this one. He's a 2-1 favorite on the books. That's what he started out as, but the lines come down a little bit, where I've seen him at -190. I really like the value from him here. Phil Hawes, you never really know what you're going to get from him. Definitely a tough guy with a solid wrestling background. So you are seeing sort of the Russian grappling versus American grappling here. Phil Hawes did get out-grappled and pretty much dominated by Roman Dolidze. Ikram, on the other hand, has shown pretty brilliant grappling, getting a submission win in his Dana White Contender Series debut. The dude is seriously talented. That's why he's getting a higher level opponent for his UFC debut. Ikram famously was Khamzat's toughest matchup prior to joining the UFC. Khamzat did end up KOing him in that fight, but Ikram, Khamzat did say that Ikram was his toughest opponent, at least before he fought Gilbert Burns. So Ikram is the pick here. I think he gets a finish as well. It seems like Phil is kind of rushing back from such a violent loss that he took. I hope he starts getting it together, but Ikram, I really believe in the hype with this guy. I've been anticipating his UFC debut for a while, and I expect fireworks. Perhaps setting up a Khamzat rematch way down the line. Obviously, he doesn't have that added... he never beat him or anything, so it's not like he can start calling for Khamzat, but this guy's talented, and I think one of the better Russian prospects that we've seen in a while. Next up is Parker Porter versus Braxton Smith in the heavyweight division. We all know Parker Porter by now. He's been fighting in the UFC, seems like forever. Braxton Smith is a newcomer. He's only 5-1 in his career. All KOs, all within 2 minutes. Braxton has only been fighting for like a couple years. I think his professional debut was in 2021. And while I do think Braxton Smith has the ability to KO Parker Porter really quick, so like a first round KO could be a decent play, I think Parker Porter to win by finish is the better play here. If he survives the first 2 rounds, Braxton Smith's going to be lost. Parker Porter does have that massive experience advantage in this one. So I think if he survives the early onslaught, which I do see happening, I think Parker Porter finds a way to get Braxton out of there. Parker Porter's been around for too long to let a guy who's really a newcomer to the game beat him here. So Parker Porter is the pick. He's a -165 favorite in this one. And I think Parker gets a finish here as long as he can survive that early onslaught from Braxton Smith. Next up is Marina Rodriguez. Kind of surprising seeing her on the prelims here, but she's taking on Virna Jandiroba. Marina Rodriguez is 4-1 in her last 5. Virna is 2-3 in her last 5, coming off a win against Angela Hill. This line definitely surprised me. Rodriguez did just get KO'd by Amanda Lemos, but Lemos is one of the better fighters in the strawweight division. And despite that, she's only a -140 favorite over Virna, who has been fighting, I'd say, much worse competition in that division. And she's the +120 underdog here. Marina was on a big streak before against the top players in that division for her loss, and it does seem like Virna is sort of sub or bust. Practically all of her wins come via submission, so if Rodriguez can just survive the grappling of Virna, which I anticipate she will, I see her getting the win here. So Marina Rodriguez is the pick, probably by decision. I don't know if she's got that finishing ability to get Virna out of there, so I would just play the money line here. Next up is Khaos Williams versus Rolando Bedoya. Khaos is 2-3 in his last 5 fights, I believe, and he's a massive favorite here at -305. Rolando Bedoya is an underdog from Peru who's making his UFC debut here. Khaos, he's a striker, and he's got ridiculous power, and I'm going to quickly fact check myself. He's 3-2 in his last 5 is Khaos Williams. The dude's got as much power in the welterweight division as anyone. He can KO you with a jab, with he doesn't really need to put his whole body into it to put you to bed. So I don't think Rolando Bedoya, despite being 14-1, I don't think he's ever faced anyone on Khaos Williams' level, anyone with his sort of power in the Peruvian MMA scene, that South America scene. Of course, a lot of great fighters coming from that region, but Khaos Williams, I think it's just going to be too much. It's going to overwhelm him. Obviously, fighting is not a bodybuilding competition, but you can pretty easily tell that Khaos Williams is just on another level athletically from Rolando Bedoya, and so I think that power compared to the general fluffiness of Rolando, it's going to be too much. So Khaos Williams is the pick. I think he gets a KO here to get back on track. Next fight I'm really excited for is Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Devin Clark. Kennedy is 3-2 in his last 5, with Devin Clark being 2-3 in his last 5 in the light heavyweight division. Kennedy's coming in at around a 2-1 favorite here, with Devin Clark plus 160 underdog. Devin Clark is kind of used to being an underdog at this point. We often see him with a similar line in his previous fights. And Kennedy, I really am a believer in this guy's ability. I think he's got all the goods to make a run in the light heavyweight division, which it's kind of, it's tough to say that after he has been around for a while and has had a struggle putting a long win streak together. But I think he's on a 2-fight win streak right now, and it really does seem like he's starting to put things together. He's only 30 years old, which is on the younger side for the light heavyweight division, and he's as athletically gifted as anyone. He's a giant of a man. He's 6'5", kind of has like Johnny Walker build, but I think even more. I think he has more power than Johnny Walker, and he doesn't really get out grappled at an insane level. Like, we have seen him put in difficult positions, but he's usually able to survive. And I don't see Devin Clark posing much of a threat on the feet, as much as he will probably just try to wrestle Kennedy up against the fence and out-muscle him. So I think this fight probably makes it into the 2nd or 3rd round, but Devin Clark is not going to be able to out-muscle Kennedy for too long, and I think Kennedy finds his chin sooner or later and gets a KO in this fight. So Kennedy by KO is the pick here, and I'll be really interested to see what the UFC does with him after that. Next up is like the featured prelim, if you will. This fight would have definitely been deserving to be on the main card, but sometimes that featured prelim is just as important as being on the main card. It is the advertisement for people to buy the card. So in that aspect, I think they could not have picked a better fight. This one's going to be fireworks. Drew Dober is 3-2 in his last 5, and a minus 205 favorite in this one. Frevola, on the other hand, is the plus 175 underdog. He is also 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Both of these guys can brawl with the best of them in the lightweight division. If it comes to a close exchange, they usually come out on top. They usually are able to find guys' chins, especially as of late with Frevola and Dober. Both of them have been getting KOs. I think Dober is one of the more underrated guys in the lightweight division. He has the loss to Islam Makhachev, which that's when Islam was a world beater, and the grappling advantage was just too much. So Frevola does not pose nearly the danger in the grappling department that Islam does. Obviously, no one does. Dober does. He is the Crimson Chin. You can't put him to sleep. And so my thoughts are just with that is I think Frevola's chin gives a little earlier. So I anticipate both guys getting hurt in this one because they're just going to throw caution to the wind and beat the hell out of each other. And in those style of fights, Dober can beat anyone, really. He's got crazy power. And so this is going to kind of be like the Spider-Man meme, the two Spider-Men pointing at each other, because both of these guys are very similar. I think they have similar skill sets, but it's going to be fireworks. I'm really excited. Both of these guys are tough as nails. So it's going to be a battle of wills. Who wants it more? Who's got that extra gear to get the finish at the end there? So I think Dober has that slight striking advantage and power advantage over Frevola to get the win here. But I really wouldn't be shocked with this fight going either way. So Dober is the pick. Next up, the first fight on the main card is Jourdain versus Kron Gracie. Or I'm not sure if it's Kron. Jourdain's 2-3 in his last 5. I think he's a solid fighter. He's a big volume striker on the feet. He's got a mean streak to him. He's really hype. He's the -180 favorite in this one. And Kron Gracie, on the other hand, you don't need to look further than his last name to know what he's about. He's a grappling specialist, jiu-jitsu world champ, which it feels like all these jiu-jitsu world champs end up making their way to the UFC sooner or later. He has that Gracie legacy to him, but he only is 1-1 in the UFC, with his most previous fight coming in back in 2019, a loss to Cub Swanson. And that's when Cub Swanson was, I'd say, much higher regard as an opponent. Cub was no joke, and 4 years is a long time, so people might look at that now and think less of it, but that's a tough fight. So he lost that fight to Cub Swanson, but I think Kron Gracie gets the win here. I think he finds a way to sub Jourdain. We've seen Jourdain get put into precarious grappling situations against far less skilled grapplers than Gracie. Most people are going to be worse at finishing submissions than Gracie here. I think Jourdain has a tendency to give up his back, and if Gracie is able to get in that position, it's over. There's no way he's surviving that. So I think Gracie gets a rear naked choke finish here over Jourdain in his long-awaited return, 4 years in the making. Obviously, that's concerning, but I don't think the jiu-jitsu skills have gone anywhere. The biggest question mark for him is going to be ring rust and surviving on the feet and seeing if he can even get the fight to the ground, which I think he'll find a way to do that. So Gracie is the pick. Next up is Movsar Evloev versus Diego Lopes. This is probably the easiest fight to call on the card. Evloev is a -850 favorite here. You're not going to see much more drastic odds than that really in the UFC. Evloev is he's 16-0. Diego Lopes, I think, is 21-5. Fighting on short notice. Evloev is a guy who clearly has been getting ducked by everyone in the division. I think he's going to be really pissed off and going to want to finish here because, frankly, he needs a finish. I think if he had been getting more finishes as of late, perhaps he wouldn't be in this position where he has to fight basically a nobody to sort of climb the rankings. So I think the UFC would be far more inclined to push him to the top of the contenders list if he was getting finishes. So I think he's got a lot to prove. Everyone knows that he's tough. No one's been able to crack that code quite yet. And I do not anticipate this guy honestly touching him. Lopes lost his Dana White Contender Series debut, and that's to a guy who isn't Movsar, is Evloev. So Evloev, I think he gets a finish here. I think he's going to be highly motivated. And if and when he does, he's going to be definitely knocking on the door of a top contender fight because he definitely deserves it. He's been on a crazy win streak, and he's, he can't keep fighting these unranked guys. He's got to, sooner or later, take on someone at the top of the division. So Evloev money line is the pick here, Evloev by finish. The third fight on the card from the top is Jessica Andrade versus Xiaonan. Xiaonan is going to be the pick here. Andrade is coming off of a loss to Erin Blanchfield. Xiaonan has a solid record herself. She did lose to Marina Rodriguez, who fights earlier on this card, but despite losing, she did still look impressive in that fight on the feet. She's really quick. She has great striking timing. And Andrade, on the other hand, yes, she was fighting short notice against Erin Blanchfield, but we did see her get hit a lot in that fight. And I don't think Blanchfield is half the striker that Xiaonan is. So that speed advantage, I think, is going to come into play here. It'll be interesting to see if Jan has the power to really hurt Andrade and to keep Andrade at bay. Obviously, Andrade is unbelievably strong for the division. She's been in there with the best of them, been around for a while. She's always dangerous, but her last fight was a bit concerning, even if it was on short notice. So I think Xiaonan, her grappling is good enough to keep it on the feet, and if it's on the feet, I think she's going to piece up Andrade. I don't know if she'll find a finish, but I think she gets a decisive victory here, so unanimous decision. The co-main is an absolute banger in the welterweight division. It is Gilbert Burns, who is 3-2 in his last 5, versus Belal Bully Muhammad. He's the plus 105 underdog here. He's on an 8-fight win streak. Dana White has already said that this is a title eliminator bout. Winner gets a shot at the belt. And despite how impressive Gilbert Burns has looked as of late, it just kind of feels like it's Belal's time. It feels like this scenario has evaded him for a really long time, and the pieces are all kind of getting put into place for him. He's a guy who's peaking at the right time. He's coming off of the best win of his life, the best performance certainly in the UFC. He had more success on his feet than he really ever has in that fight, and he was taking on an undefeated guy, blanking on his name. It was against, out of Philly, Sean Brady, pardon me. Sean Brady, who was an undefeated fighter, and he showed an ability to really dominate on the feet. Obviously, Sean Brady is not known for his striking ability, but his grappling is no joke. And so he is he was a good sort of opponent who I think kind of mimics Gilbert Burns a little bit. Gilbert is a monster on the feet as well, and he's got crazy KO power, but Belal, I think he's got a better gas tank, and he's a guy he's peaking at the right time. A win here sets up potentially a Leon Edwards rematch, which I think would be unbelievable. The storyline is great. They both had that draw, which, if you ask me, I think Belal was on his way to getting finished in that fight. Leon was definitely piecing him up, but you never know. You can't say that for sure. And I also think Belal is somehow on another level right now than he was even in that fight. I think Belal thrives off of the energy he gets from a live crowd as well. So I love both of these guys. Gilbert Burns, it does feel like he's been knocking on the door of the title for a while now. He had that really close fight versus Kamaru where he came up just a bit short. And he was definitely winning that fight at times. And then he had that fight versus Khamzat, who, let's face it, Khamzat's a 185er. He'll probably never make 170 again. So you can't really say that he was fighting up a division, but in a sense, he was fighting a guy who's so much bigger and I thought he did more than hold his own against Hamzat. He hung right in there with him, and I think came close to winning that fight a couple times. Probably one of the best fights you'll ever see was that matchup. So nothing but respect for Gilbert Burns. Gilbert's he's good everywhere, but it just feels like this is Belal's time. And setting up a rematch with Leon just would be unbelievable. So Belal's the pick here. I don't know if I anticipate him getting a finish, but I wouldn't put it completely... I wouldn't be completely shocked if he did find a finish later in the fight at least, because Gilbert does sometimes have a tendency to gas because he just goes so hard and early on in the fight. So I would just play the money line here. Belal Muhammad is the pick. And then finally, the main event of the evening. It is Henry Cejudo, Triple C, versus Aljamain Sterling. Cejudo is the slight favorite here, ever so slight, -115 versus Aljo, about -105. This one is for the bantamweight belt that Henry Cejudo never really lost. He won it off of Dominic Cruz and announced his retirement that night from fighting, and that was about 3 years ago. Aljamain did inherit the belt after that, and kind of has been the story of his championship reign has been pretty fluky, let's be honest. And that's not necessarily in his control, but certainly he was losing to Petr Yan and was gifted the belt through Jan's headassery, kneeing him in the head. Obviously, we don't need to go through that again. He did have the rematch then, which he dominated Petr Yan, but it just felt like Yan was not the same guy we've seen. He didn't have a team with him, but I'm not going to count that one against one. That's a legit win for Aljamain Sterling. But when it came time for him to sort of prove himself again against TJ Dillashaw and really establish that, I'm no joke, people need to start taking me seriously, TJ Dillashaw fought him with one arm. And it's obviously Aljamain did what he had to do. The fight was never in question, but you kind of have to throw an asterisk on that when the guy you're fighting is clearly severely injured going into the fight. I've had my fair share of shoulder problems as well, and when your arm's dislocating, it doesn't take much. So it's not really like Aljamain Sterling inflicted that injury upon him either. I mean, it was like that was just gonna happen no matter what in a fight. So Aljamain's got a lot to fight for here. He does have a chance to prove himself and say, despite all this nonsense that's happened in my title reign, I'm still the best 135-pounder in the world. And that's the opportunity he has against Henry Cejudo. I do just think he's going to fall short here due to the striking advantage in this one. Henry Cejudo, Olympic wrestler. Aljamain Sterling, great grappler in his own right. His wins come from chain wrestling, getting you in a bad position, taking your back, and either getting the sub or just inflicting damage upon you while he's on your back. The dude is like a spider monkey. But Cejudo, his grappling is world class. Obviously, he's got that ring to prove it, or that medal to prove it, rather. And I do feel like Cejudo is similar to Yoel Romero in the sense that he doesn't use his wrestling as much offensively, whereas he sort of conserves his energy and just saves his energy for his striking, in which he's a very impressive striker. Aljamain's going to be the bigger fighter in this one, but Cejudo beat Dominic Cruz, who is a similar stature to Aljamain. Both are like 5'8". Aljamain might be a little thicker, but Cejudo is he's got some meat to him as well, so he can definitely put on weight, as we saw during his retirement phase. So Aljamain might be a little bigger here, which could help him in the grappling exchanges, but I don't see him taking an Olympic gold medalist back too easily. And if this fight stays on the feet, Cejudo's just so much more proven. He's got those legit TKO wins and that power to drop people that kind of we haven't seen from Aljamain. Aljamain hasn't really gotten a legit TKO win on the feet in a couple years. So I think this fight takes place primarily standing, which benefits Cejudo a great deal. Cejudo's just, he said he's got the better fight IQ, and I tend to believe him. He's spent the last 3 years coaching up Davison Figueiredo, Zhang Wei Li, John Jones a little bit. So he's been able to see sort of fighting through a different lens here, which I think is going to benefit him a great deal. Now he sort of has that coaching perspective that is only going to benefit him in this fight. So I think Cejudo's the pick here. I don't know if I think he gets a finish here on Aljamain. I think he finds a way. 25 minutes is a long time. Aljamain might get frustrated if he's unable to take him down, and perhaps he can, when he's like diving at Cejudo's legs, he gets caught with a knee. Cejudo is very creative with his legs and knees, so I think Cejudo finds a way to get a finish in this fight. And with that, that wraps up the UFC 288 breakdown. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, do all that stuff. Subscribe if you're into it. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of my picks. Happy Cinco de Mayo to all, and enjoy the card this weekend. Later.